Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group, located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today we are talking about hunting and being hunted. We know that Mike Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow, the purveyor of sleep and beautiful somber dreams, or that's not the right word, peaceful dreams out there. The man himself, Mike Lindell, got raided by the FBI, and we're going to start off our first segment on this story because this is sort of the continuation of the MAGA war. And so we'll take a look at what Mike Lindell had to say about it. And we do have some documents on this one. So remember that we hadn't had a lot of documents to really take a look at because all of these are grand juries and they're all under seal and so on and so forth. But we do have some documents that Mr. Lindell shared, and so we'll take a look at those. But we got several clips from Lindell telling us that the guy was just on a hunting trip and they raided him when he was at a drive-thru at a Hardees. So we'll take a look at that. We've got documents to look at. We've got some backstory over there from the Washington Post. We've got raid conversations from Harmeet Dhillon. And then we've got Katie Hobbs here in Arizona. It's very kind of hilarious. Is spiking the football. And then actually there were some crime scene photos that came out from the FBI. So, we've taken a look at a lot of the Trump crime scene photos of the affidavits and all that stuff. And now we've got some FBI crime scene photos from the raid of MyPillow and CEO headquarters. So we'll get into all of that. Then we've got some Trump news as usual. Big headline hit yesterday, and TechnoFog really did a great job, an amazing write-up on this. But Igor Danchenko, remember we talked a little bit about him in prior shows because he was involved in the Sussman saga and the Durham prosecution and all that's coming up. But turns out this guy is a paid FBI informant for several years. And so it just gets more ridiculous day by day as the saga continues. So we'll take a look at that. We've got two different affidavits that we'll take a look at. And so let me show you this little preview here. This was the affidavit that we originally read through on the left here. And then on the right was the new one that just got filed just a few days ago. And there are actual differences between the two. And so we'll read through both of those and see why we've got some differences and what the new releases are all about. And then we've got some January 6th news. Bennie Thompson said that the hearings are coming up. He's thinking about another hearing. It's either September 26th or September 28th. I might have had a typo there. We'll have to figure that out. But he is wanting to dig into the hearings, and we'll see what that looks like. But Donald Trump, speaking of January 6th, called in and actually spoke with Ashley Babbitt's mother. And so we'll take a listen to that, see what he had to say there. And then lastly, because Congress is back in session, we know they're all walking, trekking their way into Congress. And Alex Stein, primetime number 99, by the way, he just had another hilarious video out here today about who's he harassing today? It's not really harassing. It's conversating is really what's happening. Conversing with these people. Swalwell, that's right. And so they're all back in session. And we have Rand Paul, who blasts Anthony Fauci pretty hard. He actually plays a clip of him from 2004 and says, "Why do you sound so much different back then than you do right now? This is weird." And he played it, and then he got scolded. They said, "You're out of order, Rand." So we'll take a look at that. We've got Representative Hank Johnson calling MAGA Republican parents terrorists like J6ers because they care about their kids' education. How dare they? Jamie Raskin, representative, is another representative who is continuing major double standards. We'll listen to him ranting and raving about oil companies and saying the oil companies put illegitimate pressure on the backs of everyday Americans. And then you turn around and you say, well, what the hell do you think the DOJ was doing, the FBI, and your fake little January 6th committee, Jamie? We'll listen to him. And then Ron Johnson actually got into it with several people over from Twitter, three of them. And he got all three of them to admit, yes, Twitter can, in fact, influence an election, obviously. But previously, they were sort of like, no. It's people just post photos over there. And we don't know anything about any elections. What are you talking about? So some fun stuff from Ron Johnson. And as you can see, my friends, boy, oh boy, do we just have a lot to get to today. 3 full segments, and I'm looking forward to unpacking them with you. And if you want to be a part of the show, a part of the program, the best place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can see our community over there is chatting away. Bonnie Speck came in, and she started the show off with one of these. Great. Here it is. GIF versus GIF. Here's a poll. This doesn't look scientific at all, Bonnie. All right, 70% saying GIF versus 30% GIF. Looks like fake news to me. But anyways, right, that's what's going on over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Go sign up if you want to get the morning walk and talks and be a part of those conversations as well. We also have a YouTube membership, which you can sign and join up and support the show. Shout outs to Tracy O'Shea, who's a member. Bear Ashby's in the house over there. Who are members. Click the join button right next to that subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed. You get to use those fun GIFs like the Binger GIF and the Hunter Biden GIF if you'd like to use either one of those. And of course, I am a criminal defense lawyer at the R&R Law Group as I started the show. We help good people charged with crimes out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Any person charged with any crime in the state of Arizona, we are very passionate about helping. We have an entire team of people who help. 480-787-0394 is the place to go if you want to get some help. And I'm going to be talking all about how we use video at our law firm tomorrow to help people, to connect with people. You know, there's a lot of bad information out there in the world. There's a lot of lawyers out there. There's a lot of business owners out there who will just sort of promise you one thing and deliver another. And we try to use video to be authentic and to communicate what we stand for in order to help people. And I'm going to be talking a lot more about that tomorrow. We've got a free masterclass if you want to swing by and join us. Go to ytclientcashmachinemasterclass.com. We're going to do the show. We're going to do the morning walk and talk, and we're going to squeeze this masterclass in. It should be about an hour, hour and a half, 1 p.m. Eastern time right before the show. So come check us out. And it's really for lawyers, but if you are a small business owner and you can just substitute your business with the word law firm, then it should apply to you. It's the same thing. So come check us out, ytclientcashmachinemasterclass.com. And it's going to be fun. It's kind of my first one of these webinars. I got a coach, and we've been working on this thing for a while. I've got a whole separate mind map that I'm all real proud about, so I'm excited to share that. Anyways, all right. And so now that the stream is nice and warmed up and everybody is here, let's get into the real business of the day. MAGA warfare continues. Biden and the DOJ have declared war on a whole number of Trump allies, deputies, people who are, I guess, even closely related to Donald Trump, are now in the crosshairs of the FBI and the DOJ. We learn that Mike Lindell, the purveyor of sleep, the CEO of MyPillow, the man who just helps large portions of America rest serenely and peacefully every night, got raided by the FBI. He was sitting there at a Hardees about to go on a hunting trip, and FBI agents came crashing in to the front of the Hardees, the drive-thru, as he's sitting there peacefully trying to just get a nice meal. And so we've got 2 clips from Mr. Lindell himself. Before we take a look at the documents that he shared with some news media, we've got some backstory. We've got some speculation about whether this is part of an ongoing raid that was already revealed some time ago. And then we've got reaction, including crime scene photos that we learned came out from the FBI. We'll take a look at those here at the end of this segment. But first, let's hear from the man himself, Mike Lindell. The CEO of MyPillow is out now telling us exactly what happened. Here he is.
Today, the FBI, you're going to hear this, and you're probably already hearing it in the news. The FBI came after me and took my phone. They surrounded me at a Hardees and took my phone that I run all my business, everything with. They could have just, what they've done is weaponize the FBI. It's disgusting. I don't have a computer. Everything I do have that phone, everything was on there. And they told me not to tell anybody. Here's an order not to.
Now you see that order from the FBI saying, don't tell anybody. And we actually have a copy of that. So it looks exactly like that. We're going to take a look at that in a minute. But you see the seal, you see the date on there, and we're going to see what that actually says in a minute. But Mike Lindell, he looks a little bit sort of, deflated a little bit. Not defeated, but deflated. He just, they took my phone. It's literally everything's on there. It's my whole business is on there. And it's just a big problem. It's really not a cool thing. Some people out there, I think, just sort of think that when the FBI comes by and they just seize your property, that it's like getting a traffic ticket or something, like it's something minor. It's a horrendous violation of somebody's property rights. It has to be done for the utmost important reasons in this country. That's why we go through all these procedures of having warrants and judges and probable cause and all this stuff. When the standard for these things drops to now prosecuting and criminalizing what should be perfectly protected speech, like participating in an election, questioning the candidates, the process, all that's perfectly legitimate. To now start to declare that there are criminalities here just such that you can go and raid people and take their phones, as though it's just like handing out a report card or something, right? It's a seizure of somebody's private property. And in this case, it is directly interfering with a giant business that employs people all over the country, that delivers very nice, soft, restful pillows all across the fruited plains of America. So let's check back in with Mr. Lindell.
Don't tell anybody. Okay, I won't. Well, I am. So there you go.
So he is telling us, and that was an earlier video. He detailed more of the story back on his show. Here is Mike Lindell on the Lindell report, who just got raided by the FBI, had a cell phone seized. Here he is communicating a little bit more about the details about him being invaded at a Hardees.
Well, everybody, welcome to the Lindell report. And I guess I have my own breaking news tonight. This afternoon, I went down hunting in Iowa for the early teal season with my friend this morning at 4 a.m. We got up, headed down to Iowa. We were coming back, and we stopped to go through a Hardees in Mankato, where I was born, in Mankato, Minnesota. And cars pulled up in front of us, to the side of us, and behind us. And I said, these are either bad guys or the FBI. Well, it turns out they were the FBI.
FBI, and that is not a good feeling to have your vehicle surrounded by federal agents demanding this, that, or the other. And you can see how sort of insulting it is, right? How condescending it is to just go, oh, there he is. He's going to get a hamburger. Oh, we're just going to go now and just get him, everybody. And why, right? Because they're going to say, well, he might delete his evidence, or he might do something with the cell phone, or flush it down the toilet, right? Dispose of the evidence. And they don't want that to happen. So they're going to go and seize it when he is least expecting it. So Mike Lindell out on a hunting trip, getting raided by the FBI. He did share some documents with the media. We do have those pulled up. Let's take a quick look at these. Mike Lindell ordered by subpoena to testify before a grand jury. You can see these documents coming out of the United States District Court for the District of Colorado. Oh, we see Colorado there. So this emanating out of that jurisdiction. It says, to Mike Lindell, the subpoena to testify before a grand jury is not about the person. You see that box is not checked. It's really about the documents and the objects. It says, to Mr. Michael J. Lindell, you are commanded to appear in the United States District Court at the time, date, and place shown below to testify before the court's grand jury. When you arrive, you must remain at the court until a judge or a court officer allows you to leave. Where? United States District Court, Grand Junction, Colorado, 81501. And so Mr. Lindell, right, obviously somebody who has a big business, but I'm sure he's got some funding to have his attorneys deal with this and, to pick up and leave and sort of go to Colorado. But for anybody else, right, think about the expenses, think about the time, and it's not like Mike Lindell's time is insignificant, right? He may have been on a hunting trip, but I'm sure he's quite busy to manage an organization like he manages and to produce what he produces. It's a big job. So now he's got just extra time to just take off and go and jump and attend a court proceeding because some judge signed off on an order somewhere. Date and time, this is ordered 11/3/2022 at 8 a.m. And so, right, Mike Lindell may be able to weather this storm, but many other people can't. Many other people can't just pick up and fly from their home state to Colorado because some judge signed off on a document. It says here, you must also bring with you the following documents, either electronically stored information or objects, and they don't give us any details on that, but they say, see the attachment, which we'll take a look at. This was signed off on September 7, 2022, clerk of the court from the Colorado court. Signature from the deputy clerk is from N. Richards over there. The name, the address, and the telephone number of the U.S. attorney who actually filed the request for the subpoena is this fella. Aaron Tittlebom is here from the Assistant United States Attorney's Office. And we have another scan from 2 additional pages, but he is out of the Denver, Colorado office. The cover sheet of this document delivered to Mike Lindell comes from the U.S. Department of Justice out of the District of Colorado, dated September 7th. It's regarding a grand jury subpoena, number 22-105. It says, "Dear subpoena recipient," meaning Mike. Hey, Mike. They say, an official criminal investigation of a suspected felony is being conducted by an agency of the United States and a federal grand jury in the District of Colorado. As a subpoena recipient, you are not under an obligation of secrecy. However, we request that you do not disclose the existence of this subpoena for an indefinite period of time. You have no legal obligation to stay silent, but we do ask that you do that with the implied veiled threat that if you don't do that, then maybe there will be some consequences. You know, you wouldn't want to be prosecuted for a crime by this same U.S. attorney, would you? And if you are uncooperative with him now during the initial investigation, maybe he doesn't give you such a good plea deal later down the road. You know, if you don't sort of be cooperative at this moment during this investigation, in fact, maybe he decides to charge you if you disclose this subpoena. You're not required to disclose it or to not disclose it, but if you do, you're going to hurt my work. You know that, right? He writes, although the law does not require non-disclosure unless there's a court order that's issued, we believe that the impact of any disclosure could be detrimental to the investigation. And so Mike Lindell obviously doesn't care. They say, can you please not tell anybody about our grossly inappropriate criminal prosecutions of our political enemies? Can you please just keep that on the down low between you and us? Mike Lindell said, no. He made several videos immediately. Hold on a minute. I'm going to go on the Mike Lindell report and I'm going to detail the whole thing. Several videos, he's making it known for all of us so that we can all see this stuff because the U.S. Attorney's Office doesn't want you to know about it. And the veiled threat continues. Now that Mike Lindell has made it known, is he jeopardizing their investigation? Is he doing something that's detrimental to the U.S. Attorney's Office? My goodness, does that make him an insurrectionist? Maybe we should all just give up. This continues, it says, if you do not believe that you can comply with this request, please notify the undersigned Assistant U.S. Attorney before you disclose the existence of this subpoena. Thank you. Sincerely, Andrew Tittlebom, Assistant United States Attorney. Right, so now that Mike Lindell has made it available, now I guess maybe he's going to be penalized for it. Maybe they decide to, in fact, charge him because of this. Now, my understanding is Mr. Lindell talked to his lawyers about not disclosing the phone or not handing it over, and they advised him, you got a subpoena, you got to do it. And so I'm guessing that this U.S. attorney knew that he was going to disclose it before he did. But what is going to be harmed? Aren't you tired of this garbage? Every single one of these investigations you can't talk about. National security implications. Oh, it's confidential. Oh, America's going to melt down. All of our eyeballs are going to melt out of our sockets as soon as anybody in the public knows what we all have been seeing as is a corrupt, degraded, disgusting FBI operating with impunity for years now. We have questions about what they're doing. But if you disclose it, not good for you. It might come back to really bite you in the butt. Signed by Andrew Tittlebom, United States Attorney. Now, here is the sealed order of the court. It says United States District Court. This comes out of the District of Minnesota, which is where he was. So the subpoena is initiated out of Colorado, but they get the warrant out of the jurisdiction of Minnesota. So the subpoena is issued there. They transfer it over there. They say, your court has the jurisdiction over Minnesota. That's where Mr. Lindell is. So after the application is submitted by the prosecutor, it goes here. In the matter of the search of a person located in the District of Minnesota, described in the attachment for the items described in attachment B, sealed by order of the court. Now we have a case docket that we can follow. It says search and seizure warrant. As to whom is this addressed? It says any authorized law enforcement officer. You now have authority by virtue of the court to go seize these materials. They tell us an application by a federal law enforcement officer or an attorney for the government requests the search of the following person or property located in Minnesota. See attachment A, which is incorporated here, which we do not have. We do not have a copy of that. Or it says here, the person or property to be searched is believed to conceal. What? What are they supposed to conceal? We don't see that. Attachment B, not attached. It says, I find that the affidavit submitted here and the recorded testimony do establish probable cause to search and seize the person or property. You're commanded to execute this search warrant on or before September 21st. They have 14 days to do it. This was signed off on September 7th, so they had plenty of time to do it. There was no urgency. They didn't need to get him at a Hardees, but they did it anyways. Execute it in the daytime between 6 a.m. or 10 p.m., saying the officer executing this warrant or an officer present during the warrant must prepare and present an inventory as required by law and promptly return this warrant and the inventory back to the judge. Signed out of Minneapolis, Minnesota by the magistrate judge Tony Lang, authorizing the seizure of Mike Lindell's phone. And so we don't see any of the attachments. And until this case is unsealed or until the judge orders the unsealing, this is sort of deja vu with what we already went through with Donald Trump, right? We saw very much the same, the cover sheets, the face sheets of all these documents. But it wasn't until we got a big fight over the affidavit that we started to see more of what was behind the scenes. So Mr. Lindell has released some information. We do have identities of U.S. attorneys who are prosecuting these crimes. The people who are delivering subpoenas for all of Trump's allies appear to be just continuing to operate entirely unfettered. But the Washington Post is, of course, reporting on this as well. Let's see if they can fill in any gaps for us. They say that the FBI seized his phone. They call him an election denier. They say they served him when he was at a drive-thru area of a Hardees restaurant. That was in Minnesota. Lindell said the agents questioned him about Tina Peters, who was a Mesa County, Colorado clerk who was indicted in March on charges that she helped copy election systems. So you can see there's a little bit more detail there. FBI acknowledged what a warrant was served, they said, but they declined to elaborate, right? The FBI, it's an ongoing investigation. We can't talk about any of this. FBI acknowledged that a warrant was served, but declined to elaborate. FBI said, without commenting on this specific matter, I can confirm that the FBI was at that location executing a search warrant authorized by a federal judge. Spokesperson for the Bureau's Denver field office said in an email. Washington Post called Mike Lindell. Lindell told them that he was not involved in the copying of Mesa County's election management system, and he did not meet Peters until she attended a, quote, cyber symposium that he held in South Dakota in August 2021. He says, I have no idea what went on then. I have nothing to do with it. FBI's actions against him, are talking about voting gear, and he's got all sorts of different conversations that he's having, of course, about the election. And so Mike Lindell is yet another one of Trump's allies who faces the MAGA Republican onslaught that has been percolating all around the country. Steve Bannon had previously told us, breaking news on his show, that there were 35 others who also had subpoenas, just like the one we read through, delivered to them, seizing their property, demanding their testimony, and so on and so forth. And Harmeet Dhillon is an attorney who was communicating about all of this when she was on the Tucker Carlson show. And she said the following. She said, look, we've seen exactly what we just talked about, those subpoenas with big, broad requests, really hard to dial in on what felony are they talking about? Who are they talking about? What's the scope of the charges? What is this all about? Here's Harmeet Dhillon explaining that many of her clients have gotten the same treatment that Mike Lindell has.
Well, the truth is that a few days ago, a political reporter called several people and said, hey, have you heard or have you been served yet? The FBI is going to be serving 50 approximately search warrants
50.
and or subpoenas on Trump supporters. And then,
So is Mike Lindell in that list? Bannon and the 35 people that he had already talked about. Now Mike Lindell is added. There are 15 others. Who's waiting for the knock at the door or the seizure of their chicken nuggets?
Within 24 hours of that, three of our clients actually did either get search warrants or subpoenas. And these subpoenas are extremely broad. They're from the Capitol Siege section of the United States Department of Justice,
whatever that is,
D.C. office. And they ask for broad categories of documents. They ask for all communications dating from a month before the election until 2 months after the election. And they ask for all communications regarding dozens of people. And the categories are alternate electors, fundraising around irregularities around the election, and also a rally that happened before the January 6th situation at the Capitol.
Now, many of those things Mike Lindell and many others that we've talked about here were involved in, right? And actually, we talked about this on our morning walk and talk, which is available for Locals members and YouTube members. But we went through at length a big conversation about what the heck was I just talking? Okay, so Harmeet Dhillon, I saw something in the chat just caught me off guard. Philip Smith says, sup, Robert. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Our morning walk and talk. Gosh, it took me a minute. Our morning walk and talk. Mike Lindell is the subject of, let's go back to Harmeet Dhillon.
So the Save America rally that happened. And so basically, most of this activity, if not all of it, is protected by the First Amendment. And the United States Department of Justice is telling reporters about these search warrants.
That's what I was going to say. Mike Lindell was here in Arizona. That's the thought. That's the point that I was trying to make. Kari Lake, remember, was suing Katie Hobbs over the election because of the electronic ballot machines and all of that stuff that took place in Maricopa. But there was rumors about who was funding the lawsuit, right? Who was hiring the lawyers in order to kind of put this whole thing, move this whole needle forward. And Mike Lindell was one of the individuals who was behind one of those lawsuits, apparently, right? There were rumor mills. Oh, Mike Lindell is in there. He's in the federal court filing all of these things. And so now that Harmeet is talking about the dual slates of electors and the possibility of sort of, fundraising some of these efforts and building a secondary sort of line of defense in case, let's say, for example, Mike Pence didn't actually declare the election to be complete, right? All of those things would be now fair game. They would default back to an alternative slate of electors. We've talked all about this, right? I'm not saying that it should have gone one way or the other for the YouTube censors out there, but there were a lot of the debates about, are there legal maneuvers in order to do this? And the bulk of the courts, the bulk of everybody said, no, you can't really do any of that stuff. And they didn't entertain most of these things really on the basis of standing. But Harmeet Dhillon is now sort of detailing, right, her clients are getting the same types of subpoenas that mirror a lot of what Mike Lindell was doing. And so it makes sense that he might get one of the subpoenas that is from this same type of inquiry, which is the Capitol Siege group over there at the DOJ.
And subpoenas before they're executed. There's no other explanation for this. And I think the reason for this is to instill fear into Donald Trump supporters and into those who would challenge election irregularities right before an upcoming election, Tucker. So this is really outrageous abuse by the DOJ, and it is illegal for the DOJ to leak this information to the media, Tucker.
So two problems there. One, of course, they are infringing on perfectly free speech, what you're allowed to do. You can get out there. You're supposed to be allowed to say, I don't think that the government function that we're debating here is operating appropriately. And we think that there are room for improvements in any system, whether it's delivering electricity, whether it's the school system, whether it's the healthcare system. Why would the election system be outside of that area of debate? Why can't you question this? And why can't you file lawsuits and investigate all of these things without coming under the microscope of an active DOJ? right? You have the free speech in America, or you used to, so you could participate in those ways. But Harmeet Dhillon is saying that not only are her clients getting this, but now we see Mike Lindell apparently is as well. Let's wrap up here.
If you alone have 3 personal clients who've been raided, then it tells you the scale of this. I can't believe decent liberals are sitting back and allowing this to happen. This will wreck the country, and they're saying nothing about it. It's really shocking to me. Harmeet.
All right, and that was Harmeet Dhillon. I think that Tucker ends it after that. So Harmeet Dhillon explaining she's got clients herself that have also been raided, served subpoenas, had their cell phone seized. Don't know if they were at restaurants themselves, but it is something that we're seeing spreading all throughout America. Now, there's also more here. We see that in Arizona, a lot of people are sort of having fun over the Mike Lindell seizure, the raiding of his cell phone. Katie Hobbs, one of the worst candidates in the country running for office, posted this after the news was breaking, saying, breaking, the FBI seized the phone of Mike Lindell over the course of the search warrant. And Katie Hobbs said, oh, you mean this phone? Showing Mike Lindell taking a photograph with Kari Lake and sort of implying that this is sort of a dangerous association for the two. And I'm not so sure that that's going to go all over that well for Katie Hobbs. I think that, Mike Lindell seems like a pretty lovable guy. Helps a lot of people sleep all across the fruited plains of Arizona. And so Kari Lake responded to that. But you can see, if Mike Lindell is somebody who they can smear, if they can drag him down just a little bit, what does that do? That gives him a wide opening to drive a truck through to smear everybody else that he's been associated with, right? So they'll go out to the people on the top, the people who are sort of, influencers for certain movements. Mike Lindell's running advertisements all over the place. He's, sort of championing a cause, funding different organizations and efforts all across America. And so if they can smear him, if they can take him down, they can then smear everybody else who was associated with him. It's guilt by association. And Katie Hobbs, the coward who won't even debate Kari Lake, multiple offers, just won't do it. She just hides behind her Twitter account and posts things like that. Whereas Mike Lindell and others, right, they're out in front of people speaking for the things that they believe in. They're out there debating the issues, whereas the cowardly Katie Hobbs just hides behind her Twitter account. So pathetic, honestly. I don't even, know how she's in the running. I don't even know why she wants to be governor if she doesn't want to talk. But that's what's happening out there, all in an attempt to smear Mike Lindell. Now, after Mike Lindell had his cell phone raided, like many other cases we've covered here, we have crime scene photos, which did finally leak out. The FBI has been very proud of their efforts on this one. Lots of celebrations taking place over there at the FBI. And so let's take a look at some of these photos that came in from the FBI crime scene. Here we've got the first one here. Here's the boys who actually took the items from Mike Lindell. Here's the estimable FBI agents. Job well done, boys. Seized those pillows. I mean, nobody really should have that amount of fluff in their pillows. So very proud. That's going to be the one that they put up on the refrigerator. Tremendous job, boys. Saving America out there. We had a couple more coming in here from the crime scene. Let's see what else was here. A couple other crime scene photos. Hardees is now serving warrants where they're at. The FBI has decided that they're now going to be rebranding themselves as Fed, Bath, and Beyond. Mike Lindell might be in, for a little bit of trouble out there. Fed, Bath, and Beyond, it's a pretty established brand. They might have some competing pillows, and they've got slippers, and they got a lot of stuff there. So it's hard to know, Mike Lindell might be in for some serious trouble. We had another one here. Oh, the Fed boys. Yeah, with the pillows. The Fed boys who were going out there to probably frame some more people for kidnapping plots. Out there with their pillows, little pillow fight. Yeah, it's very cute. Yeah, it's very cute. A little sleepover. Little FBI sleepover, slumber party over there. Yeah, hey, shout out to Brandon Caserta. Brandon Caserta just started a Twitter account. Remember him? He got framed and acquitted by the FBI agents. Probably looked a lot like these guys, Fed boys. Let's see what else here we had. Oh, here's look at this. Here's the final haul. I mean, this is what they were taking out of the MyPillow factory. I mean, honestly, nobody should have that many pillows. It's outrageous. Look at all those. Look at all those pillows. I mean, where did he get all of those? How does somebody accumulate that much comfort? They needed a dolly to cart it on out of there. Unbelievable. So the FBI, obviously, hopefully they're proud of themselves. Hopefully they're waking up. Maybe they'll sleep better tonight. Maybe they'll wake up tomorrow and they'll be nice and rested. They'll be all sort of peaceful and they'll wake up and they'll say, gosh, my neck doesn't hurt anymore. And suddenly I'm wondering why I was wrecking the Constitution. And maybe they say, today I decide to change my ways, all because of the comfortable MyPillow pillows and the slippers that they have seized. One can only hope maybe they'll get a restful sleep and they'll leave America alone. But the crime scene photos from Mike Lindell are, of course, available, and the FBI will continue to be a laughingstock. All right, and so that's the Mike Lindell raid. Now, we have some big Trump new updates because there were some pretty amazing headlines that hit yesterday. A Donald Trump source, Igor Danchenko, somebody who is critical, very instrumental in the whole Russia collusion hoax that we talked a lot about here. Well, it turns out that guy wasn't just this innocent old informant. Turns out he was a paid FBI informant who was much more deeply involved than anybody even knew. The story really is breaking over from TechnoFog, and he put together an amazing write-up, and so I'll refer you over to there. We're going to take a little bit of that story from TechnoFog, but remember that we had previously talked about Igor Danchenko, this guy right here, when we spent a ton of time unpacking the Michael Sussman saga related to the Durham prosecution. And so we are swapping mind maps. We're taking a little memory back down memory lane. You remember the Durham mind map? Remember all of this? We spent days and days and days covering the trial of Michael Sussman, all the different days. Government rested after 9 days, and then they were deliberating for 6 hours, and then Michael Sussman was entirely acquitted. But you see here that we had Igor Danchenko down here at the very bottom of this mind map when we were talking about that entire saga. Igor, if you recall, was a source for the Trump PP tape, which was communicated over to Michael Steele, this guy. Michael Steele signed a contract with Fusion GPS in 2016. Fusion GPS, of course, as we know, was working with Newstar, which is where Rodney Jaffe was. Rodney Jaffe was the person who was infiltrating the White House and Trump Tower, seizing all of those documents. All of that was feeding into Fusion GPS, which was a third-party consultant for Perkins Coie. Perkins Coie was the law firm that employed Michael Sussman. Michael Sussman being prosecuted for lying to the FBI to further the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, working with Mark Elias, who runs Democracy Docket now, all on behalf of Hillary Clinton, who is now competing then against Donald Trump. That was Igor Danchenko. And the web runs thick and deep. And the FBI relied on a lot of this stuff, and they sat down with Michael Sussman. You remember James Baker, he sat down and he said, oh my goodness, are you serious, Michael? This is all a real thing? And he turned it over to Trish Anderson and Bill Priestep over there at the FBI, and they just fumbled around with this stuff for years trying to frame Donald Trump, literally. Well, it turns out that the FBI knew that this was all BS, or should have known, because they made him an actual informant after the fact, and they continued with the narrative anyways. And so that is where this all starts. Igor Danchenko, that's where he fits into the whole saga. And you zoom out on this thing, the disgusting corruption in the FBI and the DOJ knows no limits. I mean, it's unbelievable. So for detail and background on how all of this works, as usual, let's go over to the very estimable and the very thorough TechnoFog over at The Reactionary. And I do recommend that you subscribe, support his work. I am not going to read the whole article. We're just going to read the introduction, and then I'll invite you to go over to technofog.substack.com and support his work there. But he writes, Special Counsel John Durham moved to unseal a special motion. And remember, these are motions, they're called motions in limine. These are motions that are trying to resolve some of the preliminary issues before a trial starts. The motion that is just unsealed, Techno says it provides new information on the details of Danchenko's lies to the FBI. It says it gives new information about I'm signed in with him, but I'm on a different browser. So here, let's see what we can do about this. Hang on a second. I have the actual article. I'm not logged in. I am a subscriber over there, but I use a different browser, and so it's not logging me in automatically. So let's just do it together so that we can actually read it appropriately. All right, here it is. We are now logged in. It says this motion provides new information on the details of Danchenko's lies to the FBI, further information on how the special counsel Mueller ignored Danchenko's false statements, expected testimony from Clinton-connected executives, and one other crazy development, right? There's a lot to this article, and so go read the whole thing. You can see, look at the scroll wheel over here. We're just hitting the tip of the iceberg. But here is the key juicy bit. It says, but we'll start with the most damning development first. Danchenko, the guy that we just showed you in the mind map, was on the FBI payroll as a confidential human source from March of 2017 through October of 2020. Here's a clipping from the motion. It says in March 2017, the FBI signed the defendant up as a paid confidential human source of the FBI. The FBI terminated its source relationship with the defendant in October of 2020. What was going on in October 2020? Oh, yeah. Biden versus Trump. We had the election taking place just a short while after that in November. They say that the defendant lied to the FBI and FBI agents during several of these interviews, which is why they sort of terminated the relationship. But do you see that? In March of 2017, that's after the election took place. Remember, there was a lot of other things taking place in March of 2017. We talked all about this during the Michael Sussman saga. We had FBI agents, DOJ, U.S. attorneys all sitting around in the White House figuring out what to do about this because Trump won in 2016 and not Hillary. And so they were panicked big time in March of 2017. They're going, oh, crap. And they had all the FBI outgoing agents, McCabe and others, all sitting around trying to figure out what to do about this fact that Trump won. And now all of their lies that Michael Sussman was feeding down the gullet of the FBI, they all had to be papered over. Techno writes, the purposes of making Danchenko a CHS should be quite clear. Why did they make him a confidential human source? The Crossfire Hurricane investigation, which preceded all of that, was plagued with problems from the outset. The reasons for opening the investigation were bunk. Those problems continued as the investigation went on, with claims of the Trump-Russia collusion being proven unverified or outright false. That's why they targeted Flynn and others. That developed into the Carter Page FISA application, first submitted to the FISA court October 2016. That relied on the Steele dossier, the Steele reports, which we just talked about, right? That was the mind map. That's this connection that you see here. Igor, the Steele dossier, going over to Christopher Steele. All of this used to get the warrants for Carter Page. TechnoFog continues. He says, the FISA applications were renewed 3 times, more on that later. Each application had its own problems. FBI lawyers lying about Carter Page to the court being misled by the FBI. So, realizing its own misconduct, the FBI then made Danchenko a paid CHS in March to cover it up just before the third FISA warrant was submitted in April. This would allow Comey's FBI to work directly with Danchenko in support of its counterintelligence investigation against Trump. Him being a CHS also served another purpose. It protected the Bureau and the Mueller special counsel from revealing their, quote, sources and methods. You bring him in now. He's in the umbrella. He's in the hula hoop. How do you hide misconduct, writes TechnoFog? Bury the witness. Bring him in the fold. And that's exactly what the FBI did. Now, TechnoFog wrote an amazing article really unpacking the entire rest of the filing, and he's been doing a great job over there. So go check out the reactionary TechnoFog and subscribe to him and, of course, support his work. But a disgusting development from the Durham prosecution. FBI knew full well that Igor Danchenko was not a reliable source. Why? Well, they paid him. He was an FBI informant that was on the payroll. Why did they make him that after the 2016 election? They knew that Trump won. Their story was about to go up in flames, and it did in the Michael Sussman trial, but the DC jury acquitted him nonetheless because the entire system is rigged. Isn't it fun? All right, so that is Igor Danchenko. Now, Igor is being prosecuted by John Durham, and we'll see how that prosecution continues to unfold. We also have other developments in the Trump case. The Trump original judge, Judge Reinhart, who originally signed the search warrant that allowed the FBI to raid Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, issued a new order unsealing more of the original affidavit. Here is the order from Judge Reinhart. It is in the same court out of the Southern District of Florida. It is in the sealed search warrant application. And remember that there's been a lot of fights over this affidavit. Everybody wants to see what those big blacked out redactions hold. And now we're going to see more of it. Proposed order to unseal. The judge writes, the United States of America, having applied to this court for an order unsealing the notice of additional partial unsealing of the search warrant, files this motion, and the court, finding good cause, hereby orders that the notice regarding the partial unsealing shall be unsealed, done and ordered this 13th day of September out of the Southern District of Florida, signed off on by United States Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart. Now, this order, you can see, is giving us some more access to some additional documents. And one of those documents is a new affidavit, a new unsealed affidavit just submitted into the court. Here is a side-by-side of both affidavits that were filed under separate dates. Take a look at this one. You can see on the left, we have the first affidavit that was filed August 26. Application in support of a search warrant to raid Trump's residence, filed under seal. It's 38 pages long. On the right, we have the newer document filed September 9th, 2022, stamped off by the court. Same document. Looks a little bit different because it's sort of a clearer scan, but also 38 pages. Now, if we read through this, we can see that a lot of it kind of is the same, right? The first page looks like it's the same on both. We can see the second page looks like we get a little bit of a difference on the second page. Now, if I take myself off, right, you see on the original paragraph 3, we had this paragraph that was redacted. But over here, this one is not redacted. And so let's see what this one says. It's talking about the boxes that were taken. And this redacted paragraph says, since the 15 boxes were provided to NARA, additional documents bearing classification markings, which appear to contain NDI, which is National Defense Information, were stored at the premises in an unauthorized location. They have been produced to the government in response to a grand jury subpoena directed to the former president's post-presidential office and seeking documents containing classified markings stored at the premises. They say further. Now that ends, right? So there it is. So that's it. That's all we got. Right? It's not a whole lot more there. It says they were stored in an unauthorized location, right? Not a whole lot new that really stands out there. So, okay, so that's on page 3. That was on page 2. Let's see what else we have here. Same on those pages. Same here. Page 5 looks like it's the same. Page 6, page 7. So we'll just fly through both documents and see if there's anything else that's unredacted. So on the right and the left, looks like we are staying in sync. big fat redaction. So we're not seeing a whole lot. Looks like that was actually changed or unsealed. And we are on page now 18. Page 18, we have a little bit more unsealed. Okay, so now when we get to paragraph 51, looks like we have a big part of this that has been unredacted. So paragraph 51 was originally redacted. Let's see what it says now in the unredacted version. Grand jury subpoena, related correspondence, and production of additional documents. Paragraph 51 says that the DOJ has advised me that on May 11th, an attorney representing Trump agreed to accept service of a grand jury subpoena from a grand jury sitting in D.C., sent via email, sent over from DOJ counsel, right? So this means Trump's lawyers actually got that grand jury subpoena. They didn't want us to see that previously, but they're okay with us seeing this now. It says the subpoena was directed to the custodian of records for Trump, and it requested the following materials. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. So you can see sort of what the subpoena would look for. Here's what it says. Any and all documents related to the custody or control of Trump, anything bearing classification markings, blah, blah, blah. Right? Top secret, secret, confidential, NORCON, ORCON, SORCON, MORCON, LORCON, blah, 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 blah. Right? The whole list there. Now on page 19, we get another paragraph unredacted. The return date of the subpoena was on May 24th, 2022. DOJ counsel also sent Trump a letter that permitted alternative compliance with the subpoena. By providing any responsive documents to the FBI at their place of location and providing a custodian a sworn statement that all returned records have been returned. The letter further stated that if no responsive documents existed, the custodian should provide a sworn certification to that effect. Right? We talked about this. Remember, that was going to be the basis for all of this prosecution, is that the custodian of records, who I believe was Lindsay Halligan, who said, you've got everything. Okay, FBI, I know you've been rummaging around. I know you want all this stuff. We've given you everything. Just leave us alone. Saying that a sworn statement should have been provided. And again, I don't even know that that's a required thing other than just a matter of courtesy. Right? Because honestly, right, if the documents were declassified and privileged and they were Trump's personal records under president, that's like 3 layers of protections there. You could have said, they're mine. I don't have to certify anything. I'm not giving you back anything. Right? So I think, I don't even know that that is necessary. But it's funny, right? In this paragraph, in paragraph 51, they're having conversations about this being almost like a give and take a little bit. Yeah, we're saying, you've got a subpoena, but we are permitting alternative compliance with the subpoena. So, you sort of have an order from a grand jury to show up and do certain things. But if you don't, that's okay. Do it this way and that'll still be acceptable. Paragraph 52, we get a new sentence here. You can see this one is unredacted. It says on May 25th, while negotiating for an extension of the subpoena, Trump sent 2 letters to DOJ counsel. Yeah. I don't know why they had to blank that out. I mean, maybe the date. So we already read through all that. Now we get to more redacted territory until we get to paragraph 55, which they unredact this whole section here, as you can see. This one says, after an extension was granted for compliance with the subpoena. Okay, so again, right, they're working with Trump. Another extension. Yeah, here you go. Here's an extension. Here's an extension. Here's an extension granted for compliance. On the evening of June, Trump's lawyer contacted the DOJ and requested that FBI agents meet him the following day to pick up the documents. Yeah, you want these documents? Here you go. Come get them. On June 3rd, 3 FBI agents and the DOJ counsel arrived at the premises to accept receipt of the documents. In addition, Trump's lawyer, another individual called Individual 2, oh, we don't know who that is, was also present as the custodian of records for Trump's post-presidential office. I think that's Halligan. The production included a single red-weld envelope wrapped in tape containing documents. Trump's lawyer relayed, now because Trump's lawyer is probably that person, right? Counsel 1. Another individual is probably not Counsel 1. There's probably Counsel 2 in there. All right. Counsel 1 relayed that the documents in the envelope were found during a review of the boxes located in storage room. Individual 2 provided a certification letter signed by Individual 2, which stated the following, right? And that is a paragraph here. It says, and we've seen this document already. We actually read through that custodian of records document. So that's not even new. The custodian is swearing a certification saying, yes, I checked the storage room. Yes, there's no documents in Melania's closet. Yes, there's nothing else in there. There's nothing else in there in Barron's room or any of that stuff. So they're just looking in there right here. It tells us, during the production, Trump's counsel stated that he was advised that all records from the White House were stored in one location in the room, right? So they're going to be saying that this person is lying now, saying that they were all located in one room, the storage room, and the boxes of records in the storage room were the remaining repository of the records. Trump's lawyer further stated he was not advised that there were any records in any private office space or any other location around Mar-a-Lago. The agents and DOJ counsel were permitted to see the storage room and observed that approximately 50 to 55 boxes did remain in the storage room. Redacted paragraph there, so redacted sentences. We don't know what that says. But then it says other items were also present in the storage room, including a coat rack with suit jackets, as well as interior decor, such as wall art and frames, were also in the room. So that is now paragraph 57 is redacted still. Paragraph 58 says, a preliminary review of the documents contained in the envelopes produced pursuant to the subpoenas gave us the following numbers: 38 confidential, and the rest of the numbers, as we've all talked about. 15 boxes had 184 unique documents, and so on. All right, so the rest of this is pretty bland, like not a whole lot of like groundbreaking materials here. The letter stated in previous part, the redacted sentence says, as such, it appears that since the time classified documents, the one recently provided and any and all others were removed from the... Okay, so look, there's just not a whole lot here, right? So they're redacting, let's see, 65, still redacted the same. Fast forwarding, paragraph 70, we get a little bit more out of paragraph 70. They say, as explained above, the numerous boxes contain all sorts of documents. They were in envelopes. They've been stored in locations in the storage room. Okay, so not a whole lot of meat there. Let's see what paragraph 77 has. Okay, we already had that one. And then we get down to the conclusion, and that's it. Okay, so there's really not a whole lot more there, unfortunately, other than just a little bit, I guess, of evidence that Donald Trump and his lawyers were given extensions, that they told FBI agents to get there and show up and take whatever you need. And there was a give and take and a back and forth. And even when they did send over the subpoena, they said, in lieu of complying with the subpoena, here's what we'd be willing to do. We accept you showing up or sending over these documents or whatever, right? So there's all sorts of availability for continual negotiations in the back and forth between NARA and the DOJ and Trump's lawyers. But suddenly, at some point, a raid became necessary. They decided that there was no way that they could allow these documents to stand. And so that is the proposed order to unseal, of course, now being the actual order to unseal. You can see the judge just signed off on this. He didn't even write up a new order. He just took the proposed order and he just crossed out the proposed. See how they do that? See that blue line? They just say, nah, I'm not going to type up a new order. This one looks good. X that out. This is now not a proposed order. It's now the actual order. And so we'll see if the judge continues to unseal more, for more of that material in the affidavit becomes available. But that is the latest release from Judge Reinhart in the Trump FBI saga. And of course, we'll continue to follow that case. Now, the new affidavit was released. We already covered that. But Fishing Bennie Thompson is out, and he is now declaring that there's going to be more January 6 hearings because America's not dead already. America needs to be even more dead, and the January 6 committee is just the entity to do it. Here is Bennie Thompson telling us, you know, we've been really thinking about this, and now that the election is even closer, now feels like a great time for us to have another January 6th committee hearing so that we can really make sure we go after the MAGA Republicans even harder in the days right before it counts.
Well, we're looking at whether or not we'll do another hearing. We're looking at the process. process of beginning to look at the report and what that should entail, as well as closing the loop on any potential witnesses.
Are you circling in on a date for that next hearing? Is September 28th an option you're throwing around?
Well, that's the goal at this point.
That date, September 28th?
That's correct.
September 28th, of course, that's right before October, which is right before November, which is when the elections have to hit. And so September 28th is going to be the next tentative hearing date for the January 6th committee hearings. And many people are wondering if we're going to hear about Ashley Babbit and the fact that the U.S. government shot and killed a woman who was unarmed in the Capitol building on January 6th, or if that's even relevant at all. Are we going to hear any adversarial proceedings, any questions about the official narrative, any answers at all outside of what Liz Cheney and Adam Raskin and Kinzinger want us to hear? Meanwhile, Donald Trump calls Ashley Babbitt's mother at a rally, communicating his thoughts and his well wishes, saying, we've got to do something about this, and maybe he will.
Thank you for calling, and you're on. Go.
Okay. Well, Mickey, it's an honor to be with you and to everybody listening. It's a terrible thing that has happened to a lot of people that are being treated very, very unfairly. We love Ashley, and it was so horrible what happened to her. That man shot Ashley is a disgrace. And then he goes on television, and it looked like he was actually bragging about it. There's never been a thing like this has happened in our country. And I just want to tell everybody that's listening, we're with you. We're working with a lot of different people on this, and we can't let this happen. This has never happened before. You look at all of the riots that took place for the last long period of time, not just in 2020, the last long period of time, and almost nothing has happened to those people. And what they're doing here is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to our country, and it just cannot be allowed to happen, and it cannot be allowed to continue. So I just want to say to everybody, everybody's working on it, and I very much appreciate, Mickey, you're asking me to just speak to everybody, but we cannot allow this to happen to our country. So God bless everybody. We are working very hard.
Thank you, President Trump.
Trump may be working hard, but I'm not sure the GOP is. We haven't heard anything from really almost any of them on really any of these issues. We've been very critical of Mitch McConnell and others on this program, wondering where they are. You know, the Republican Party is being prosecuted by name under the guise of being labeled MAGA Republicans by the DOJ and the FBI, and the Republican Party just seems to be asleep at the wheel. Mitch McConnell's just out there running around talking about, I don't know, anything else except Trump, because he doesn't want to weigh in on it. Meanwhile, the political warfare continues on. So that was Donald Trump, the update from the two cases that we're following. Judge Reinhart unsealing more. We'll continue to cover that, including updates on Igor Danchenko's trial. And if there's any more news coming out of there, we'll cover that as well. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video while you're here, and I appreciate your support. All right. And we've got one final segment. And this is a good one. This is Rand Paul, who just, oh man, Rand Paul is one of my favorites. But first, we're going to take a water break. Cheers, my friends, to staying hydrated out there. We're on the tail end of summer over here in the United States and North America and the Northern Hemisphere, really. Cheers to staying hydrated. And then we've got one final segment here with our boy Rand Paul blasting Anthony Fauci and playing his own little clips back to him. And so let's get right into it, shall we? Senator Rand Paul blasting Dr. Anthony Fauci, playing his own words back to him, saying, you know, in 2004, you sounded a whole lot different than you sound right now. And what gives? Congress is back in session after we're getting done listening to Rand take care of Fauci in a very satisfying clip that we'll spend a lot of time on. We're going to hear Hank Johnson saying that MAGA Republicans coordinated like terrorist groups to take out school board meetings all across America. We're going to hear Jamie Raskin suddenly fighting for civic activists. And then we're going to hear Ron Johnson get 3 different Twitter executives to release or finally admit that, yeah, they can swing elections big time. They know it. Everybody knows it. This is Senator Rand Paul versus Anthony Fauci. Fauci comes back in front of the Senate, and this has been a long battle that's been going on for the eons. And finally, we're back for another season. Rand Paul gets the floor. It's his turn, his time at the Senate. It's his time. And he starts it off with a very interesting clip from Anthony Fauci back in 2000s.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
So
she should not get it.
if she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine.
That makes sense.
If she really has the flu.
She should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
Right. Makes sense, right?
This is an ongoing question, and we've had ever-evolving opinions from you, Dr. Fauci. Currently, antibody surveys show that 80% of children, approximately 80% of children, have had COVID, and yet there are no guidelines coming from you or anybody in the government to take into account their naturally acquired immunity. You seemed quite certain of yourself in 2004, but in 2022, there's a lot less certainty. One of the things that we also know after looking at this for 2 to 3 years is that the mortality from COVID is very similar, if not less, than influenza. So when we look at this, we wonder, why you seem to really embrace basic immunology back in 2004 and why you seem to reject it now.
A big difference between what you said back then when, if you get sick and you've got the actual flu, well, you don't need all the vaccines because you've got the antibodies built up. You're kind of immune, and you talked a lot about that. Like, obviously, everybody knows this is pretty basic. We kind of learned that like in grade school or something, right? And I get it. You're not going to get it again. It's like you get the chicken pox, you're going to get it once, not going to get it 1,000,000 times. Why? Because you already had it, right? You got to go through all this as a kid. But something happened in the COVID era. They had a lot of certain things to sell, didn't they? And so now Rand Paul is asking Fauci about this. What flipped there, good doctor?
Well, I don't reject basic immunology, Senator, and I have never denied that there is importance of the protection following infection. However, as we have said many times, and as has been validated by the authorization by the FDA through their committee and the recommendation by the CDC through their committees, that a vaccination following infection gives an added extra boost. And that film that you showed is really taken out of context. I believe that was when someone called in who had a reaction to a vaccine and asked me through a telephone in the interview if they should get vaccinated again. So it was in the context of someone who had a reaction. And as a matter of fact, Reuters fact-checked.
He came prepared with the fact check. Specifically, look at this. He knew that Rand Paul was going to bring this up. He's holding up a Reuters printout. It says fact check. Fauci 2004 comments are not contradictory, do not contradict his pandemic stance, is what that document says. So he came prepared. He's like, oh, Rand, hey, dummy, I knew you were going to bring that up. Look what I've got. Reuters. Oh, Reuters. Oh, yeah, wow. Oh, so Rand Paul, man, he should just be totally embarrassed now. I guess that's the end of the conversation, Rand. You total idiot. Reuters came out and they fact-checked Fauci. Yeah. And then Fauci is also deferring who? To the CDC? How many times did they change over the last 2 years? How many times? Like every 2 months. Put the mask on. Don't put the mask on. Put the mask on. Don't put the mask on. So he defers to them. But I thought that you had all of this years of experience. You're a very astute doctor, very well educated, right? He holds up a Reuters fact check. You're wrong, Rand. Look at this document that I came. I wonder if he's got a binder of other documents there.
Looked at that and said, Fauci's 2004 comments do not contradict his pandemic stance.
End of story.
Words don't lie. If you look at the words behind me, we can go over them a little bit at a time. She doesn't need it because the most potent vaccination is getting infected.
There it
yourself.
is. It is right there. So it's now Rand Paul says, I see your Reuters article and I raise you one poster board from C-SPAN. And Fauci's like, oh man, he's got a poster board. Shoot. It's a lot of work to get a poster board made up. It's like expensive. You got to go to a printer like at a FedEx or something, and you got to carry it around. It doesn't fit in the car right. It's like, oh gosh. And so Fauci comes with his little stupid paper. Oh, I'm prepared. And Rand's like, yeah. Take your stupid paper and just get out of here. Get the poster board. Put the poster board up. There it is. Put it up there. What now, doctor?
It's true. It is true, Senator. It is a very potent way to protect.
So when you're trying to tell us that kids need a third or a fourth vaccine, are you including the variability or the variable of previous infection in the studies? No, you're not. Because when you have approved vaccines in recent times, and the committees that have approved it for children don't report anything on hospitalization or death or transmission. They only report that if you give them the jab, they'll make antibodies. And you can give kids hundreds of jabs and they'll make antibodies every time, but that does not prove efficacy. So what you're doing is denying the very fundamental premise of immunology that previous infection does provide some sort of immunity. It's not in any of your studies. Almost none of your studies from the CDC or from the government have the variable of whether or not you've been previously infected. So let's look at adults.
Don't even talk about it.
3 infections. Should I get...
It has never even been talked about, right? Natural immunity never even came into the equation, right? It was never even a choice. It was get the vax or don't. It wasn't get the vax or show that you had a positive test or anything like that. It was go buy it. It doesn't go get the jab, get it and eat it and love it.
Get a fourth one. If you're going to measure whether I get a fourth one, you need a category that has a fourth one in it, and you need one that has nothing in it, no vaccine or the fourth vaccine. But you also need to know whether they've been infected. If you ignore whether they've been infected, you're ignoring a vaccine, basically. So you're ignoring a variable. So what you're giving us is you decry, and people decry vaccine hesitancy. It's coming from the gobbledygook that you give us. You're not paying attention to the science. The very basic science is that previous infection provides a level of immunity. If you ignore that in your studies, if you don't present that in your committees, you're not being truthful or honest with us.
And Rand Paul is a doctor, by the way, right? So this is a doctor, right? He's got the same medical degree as any other doctor, and he's somebody who is qualified to talk on these issues. And you can sense that in his mastery of the subject matter, right? We can hear when congressional morons don't know what they're talking about. Every time they have a hearing on social media, you have all these senators going, well, what's a like? And how many likes can you like with a like? And does it like nuke China if I like it or something? They have no idea what they're talking about. But Rand Paul absolutely does.
Senator, if I might respond, I have never, ever denied fundamental immunology. In fact, I wrote the chapter in the textbook of medicine on fundamental immunology.
Any of the guidelines for vaccines, do any of the guidelines for vaccines from the government include previous infection as something to base your decision-making on with vaccines? Do any of the guidelines involve previous infection? That's why you're ignoring previous infection, because it doesn't involve any of the guidelines. And furthermore, we've been asking you, and you refuse to answer, whether anybody on the vaccine committees gets royalties from the pharmaceutical companies.
Royalties.
I asked you last time, and what was your response? We don't have to tell you.
Right.
We've demanded them through Freedom of Information Act, and what have you said? We're not going to tell you. But I tell you this, when we get in charge, we're going to change the rules, and you will have to divulge where you get your royalties from what companies, and if anybody on the committee has a conflict of interest, we're going to learn about it. I promise you that.
They're coming in hot for you, Dr. Fauci. And when the tables turn, you can imagine that Rand Paul is serious about this, right? A lot of the Republicans just talk and hem and haw, but Rand Paul has been on this train for quite a long time, since the very beginning. He was wandering around the Senate chambers without a mask on, and everybody in the media was melting down over it, even though he has been consistent and he has been following the science according to his interpretation of it, not believing that Dr. Fauci is the walking human version, the anthropomorphized version of science.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that, please?
May.
Okay, there are two aspects for what you said. You keep saying you approve, you do this, you do that. The committees that give the approval are FDA through their advisory committee. The committees that recommend are CDC through their advisory committee. And you keep saying, I'm the one that's approving a vaccine.
Do you hear what he's doing? He is going to defer all of his advocacy, all of his decisions, all of his CNN appearances, every time he got out there and wagged his finger at America, lecturing everybody about how many people they're killing if they don't follow his orders. He's now going to defer all of this out to the committees, CDC committee, FDA committee. I was just somebody who was a spokesperson. I was just following whatever they were telling me to do. And the committee was responsible for all of these horrendous decisions, not me.
Based on certain data. So I don't really understand, with all due respect, Senator.
You're the one that said you would not reveal what companies gave you royalties, or what company gave the other scientists royalties.
Gotta move
That's
on.
what you told the committee.
Senator Paul,
Sir,
you gotta move on.
Could I
They
please
cut him
answer
off
that?
now.
Briefly,
You
yes.
keep asking committees. They're not my committees.
Yeah.
They're the VRPAC committee for the FDA and the ACIP for the CDC. So I don't have any idea what goes on
And they
with
won't reveal, as well as you won't reveal.
Okay,
what
we're
companies
gonna
you
move on. We're over time. Senator Paul, you're over. Everyone is over a little bit. I just want to make sure we keep on time here. For the record, I know Chair Murray and previous
Now
chairs
listen.
of this committee of both parties have found videos to be out of order. And I will note for the record, the video is out of order. We'll move to Senator Smith.
Thanks, Bob Casey. He's making sure that we all know Rand Paul's video of Dr. Fauci in 2004 was out of order. And so hopefully Rand Paul feels real badly about that. And he, thinks about his orderliness at the next Senate hearing. That's Rand Paul blasting Anthony Fauci. Well deserved. Meanwhile, in other congressional hearings, we have Democrats making other statements. Representative Hank Johnson, a Democrat from Georgia, is really unhappy with parents who are concerned about their kids' educations. Says that the parents who went and protested at school meetings were analogous to J6ers or to terrorists. And this was all sort of a MAGA Republican organized attack all across America. These evil terrorist parents.
January 6, 2021 will never be forgotten, an infamous day in American history.
Okay.
MAGA Republicans descended upon the Capitol.
There it is.
Engaged in an insurrection. They occupied the Capitol. 5 people were killed, hundreds injured, including hundreds of Capitol Hill police officers attacked and bludgeoned.
With water bottles.
It was
violent water bottles.
A day that we'll never forget. And people on the local level at affected school board meetings, they won't forget the MAGA Republicans descending on their school board meetings.
Wait, what? That's an interesting segue. So the segue goes from a raid, a protest, an insurrection, death of democracy, however you want to frame it, to now parents who are showing up at school board meetings saying, I don't appreciate you locking my schools down, or I don't appreciate you teaching my kids these very problematic topics. If they have those types of concerns and they show up and they just say, can I speak for 3 minutes? He says that's analogous to January 6th. What?
After January 6th, like January 6th, disrupting meetings. It was a coordinated attack happening across the country. Americans won't forget about it.
Insurrectionist parents.
Members, teachers, administrators subjected to violence, threats of violence, harassment, intimidation. And in response to that, the National School Boards Association sent a letter to the Biden administration seeking federal help. Things had gotten so far out of hand. And by the way, there's not one scintilla of evidence, either direct or indirect, that there was any coordination between the Biden administration and the National School Boards Association that caused that letter to be sent seeking federal assistance. And so
terrorist parents caring about their kids' schooling, caring about what teachers are saying and what is happening in the educational systems are now analogous to J6ers. And J6ers, as we know, are being prosecuted all across America. They're the subject of a number of different congressional hearings. They are castigating entire political parties based on the events of January 6th. And now that's being extended, according to this gentleman, Rep. Hank Johnson, to all parents who care about their kids. That's the Democratic Party. That's what they're talking about in Congress. And it's not just him. Here's another representative, Ted Lieu, posted this on Twitter. The House Judiciary Democrat Committee, they came out and they said, a resolution of inquiry is directed at the President of the United States, requesting facts that are about these various measures. Ted Lieu came out and he said, I'm going to be speaking about Republican attempts, and look what he says, MAGA Republican attempts to intimidate federal law enforcement from investigating violence and threats of violence against teachers and school officials, right? So Hank Johnson comes out and says that parents who show up at PTA meetings or at school board meetings are MAGA Republicans who are analogous to January 6 terrorists. We know that they think that is true, that they're literal terrorists and insurrectionists, right? Joe Biden just gave a speech from the gates of hell explaining all of that to the country. And now they're going to say that if you're a MAGA Republican, I guess you're intimidating federal law enforcement from investigating violence. So if you complain about it, what this sounds like to me is if you complain about the FBI labeling parents civil terrorists or homegrown extremists, right? Remember, they framed all of this under homegrown violent extremism. Then if you complain about that labeling, then you are intimidating law enforcement and you're preventing them from investigating violence. Do you hear what this psychopath is talking about from California? You can't even question them. Otherwise, you're intimidating them. And that's Ted Lieu. Right. And so this stuff is getting, more harrowing by the day as these people and their language becomes very aggressive towards everyday living, towards caring about what happens with your kids. You're now under the subject of these psychos on congressional oversight committees. Not good. Meanwhile, we have another person named Representative Jamie Raskin. Raskin posted this on Twitter. He said, when big oil, like the companies that provide the energy for the world, when they use what he calls strategic lawsuits against public participation, these are called SLAPP lawsuits. When he says the oil companies target activists with meritless, protracted, and costly litigation, they do what, says Raskin? They chill free speech and they erode constitutional rights. You see that right there in his tweet. He says anti-SLAPP laws are necessary to keep big business from crushing civic activism. Now, this sort of is one of those that really stands out. Like, are you nuts, Jamie? Are you kidding us? First of all, you are responsible in your party for using the levers of Congress to go and investigate an entire political party called the Republican Party on the back of January 6th. So everything that you have done has chilled free speech. You have necessarily, intentionally, by the creation and the execution of your committee, trampled all over free speech and all over constitutional rights with your overbroad, unnecessary investigation. A lot of people who might have otherwise said something are not speaking up. A lot of other people who might have shown up to a protest are now not. Their speech has been chilled. Their constitutional rights have been dumped all over with the DOJ and the prosecution of many of the J6ers. But now he's going to come out and he's going to say it's the oil companies that are doing this. It's not the Congress, not the federal U.S. government through the Congress, through the DOJ, and through the FBI. No, it's the oil companies. These people are nuts. Here's what he has to say. Here is Jamie Raskin ranting and raving about the oil companies, forgetting all about the fact that he's using the strong arm of government to chill speech all across America.
It's crucial that Congress protect the rights of American citizens and civic groups to engage in lawful political protest from whatever political perspective without being subjected to ruinously expensive and meritless retaliatory litigation. Presently, 30 states have in a bipartisan
meritless, costly litigation. What do you think it costs to defend yourself against January 6 subpoenas and inquisitions from the DOJ, criminal prosecutions led by the FBI? What does that cost?
Adopted anti-SLAPP laws to protect citizens from baseless lawsuits. However, 18 states don't have these laws in place, and there has never been a federal anti-SLAPP law. In the coming days, I hope to introduce a strong federal anti-SLAPP corollary, and I hope my friend Ms. Mace and friends on both sides of the aisle will join me in our efforts to end the chilling and punitive practice of stifling and discouraging civic action by the people of the United States.
Can you believe that? The gall of that guy. Stuff that might limit and dissuade Americans from participating in the political process. He doesn't want that to happen, of course. That would be a big problem. Meanwhile, him and his party are on the news every single night talking about how MAGA Republicans, the entire party, are literal threats to American democracy. Okay? That's him. So he goes in Congress, he reads from a statement one direction. Meanwhile, they're passing policies and prosecuting an entire party. Insane. Our last clip is of Ron Johnson. Senator Ron Johnson got 3 Twitter executives under fire, several of them now admitting that, yeah, Twitter can in fact influence elections. We know that previously Twitter and a lot of these social media companies, they say, oh, no, we just share photos and we just, we like memes and we like just internet things. We don't have any real serious business in swaying an election one way or the other. But now we know, as more is revealed, that's not entirely the truth. Here is Ron Johnson with 3 Twitter executives.
Let me move on. Let me use an example that I think we're all aware of. Okay, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Let's talk about the Hunter Biden laptop. Mr. Oder, do you believe that, like Washington Post, that there's authentic information on that laptop?
I'm not sure. I will say that these are massive platforms. There are billions of pieces of content.
I've got very little time.
Okay.
Mr.
I don't know.
Mr. Bowen, do you know whether, do you assume that's authentic information on the laptop?
I don't have an opinion on the laptop.
Oh, okay. So Twitter was actually very effective when they blocked the New York Post articles on the Hunter Biden laptop.
It was very effective.
We had Jack Dorsey in front of the Commerce Committee back in, I think, October 2020, and both Senator Cruz and myself asked him, because we were talking about Russians using the platforms to impact our elections, and everybody agrees that could happen. We asked Mr. Dorsey, do you believe Twitter could impact the election? Mr. Dorsey said no.
No, yeah.
Mr. Oder, do you believe Twitter has the capability of impacting the election?
I think all these social platforms, they're so massive, it's hard to believe that they're not impacting.
Mr. Bowen, do you believe that as well?
Yeah, these platforms absolutely have influence, and I believe they influence.
Mr. Kane?
Absolutely.
3 for 3 on that one. All 3 Twitter executives now admitting, yeah, it's true. Twitter does have a pretty big impact on elections. And when you compare that with what they did in the 2020 election, when the Hunter Biden saga was buried by the Twitter algorithms or by the people who run the algorithms, eliminating the New York Post story from reaching any of America eyeballs through the Twitter algorithm, none of it was to be seen because they knew that it could be problematic for the outcome that they desired. Ron Johnson getting them all to admit it, and now he recognizes that, yeah, this is a pretty big problem.
So there is a problem right there, okay? And I appreciate you acknowledging that fact.
Admitting it finally that, yeah, we can kind of tip the scales on these things. And when they bury stories that are perfectly legitimate, when they all sit there and they say, no, I actually can't tell you which way, yes or no, whether Hunter Biden laptop is legitimate or not, whether there's any basis for it or not, we don't really know. Well, then why'd you bury it? Why'd you censor it? Why'd you make sure that nobody could see it? Oh, that's right, because it was very problematic for your favored candidate. And so that is Ron Johnson getting 3 for 3 different Twitter executives to admit that, yeah, we do have the ability to tip the scales. Rand Paul, of course, also blasting Dr. Fauci, getting him to eat his words from 2004. We covered the source from the Trump investigation, the Russia collusion hoax, Igor Danchenko. Turns out he's a paid FBI informant. And of course, we talked all about the raid of Mike Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow and the purveyor of serene sleep all across America. And so we covered a lot of ground, my friends, but now it's time to hear from you. And so let's see what you have to say about all of this and more over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I saw a couple super chats come in at the start of the show, a couple big ones. Whoa! Marion Holtzman with a couple big dono questions. Let's see what we've got here. Marion says, I'm sorry, if you don't have a backup by now, everybody has some kind of cloud account, if not a secondary computer, phone, or tablet. Come on now. Yeah, and so he's talking about Mike Lindell, right? Mike Lindell, they took his phone, and I think you're probably right about that, Marion. It's like you've got your iCloud or your Samsung or whatever that your stuff's backed up on, or even your Google account, Even a business like Mike Lindell, he's probably using some cloud email platform, right? Like a Google, like a G Suite or a Microsoft, whatever they use or something, right? He's probably on that. So he'll probably be able to get a lot more of it back, but it still is, it still is a seizure of your property, and it's pretty gross. So thank you for that, Marion. Another one came in from Marion, says, yes, at Soak Up the Sun Man, I did. Come on now. Political theater on all sides, it's BS. And so it sounds like Marion Holtzman is responding to at Soak Up the Sun Man, saying, I did. Come on, man. It's political theater on all sides. It's BS. I think it's true. I think it is true. A lot of this is political theater. I think the Republicans are even on board playing the political theater. They really sort of seem like they don't care a whole lot about a lot of these issues. They care about maintaining power, and they feel like a lot of this stuff is not supporting them. All right, and so those two came in from Marion. Oil Smoke Jones says, no comment. They might be watching. I can't afford lawyers, and I'm too old for jail. So just no comment, just a nice even-keeled, not ruffling any feathers, just sort of letting things lie. Very safe, smart, very smart. Should I do that with the show? Just come out here and talk about nothing meaningful? Nothing consequential? No, I can't do that. George Cannon is here and became a member. So shout out to George Cannon, who became a member on YouTube, which is awesome. Welcome, George. And that's awesome. You're going to get those morning walk and talks, which we do have over there about 6 days a week over there on the morning walk and talks. And they're fun. Somebody named Speech Unleashed was concerned that I was going to get hit by a car today. Let's see what was going on today. That was in the park. Let's see what else was going on today. Yeah, that's in the park this morning. And there's a busy street somewhere around here. Yeah, that one. That busy street. And I say, Rob, get off the busy road. It's dangerous over there. So we have George Cannon. You're going to get that same video on YouTube. You can get it on Locals or on YouTube if you're a member. Thanks for joining up, George. Bear Ashby says, hey, Rob, thanks, just at a loss for words. Honestly, I think a lot of us are at this time. So you're not alone there, Bear. Thanks for being here. Vaso says, I was a DC lobbyist. They would purposely keep Rand from any subcommittee hearing with little Tony. We would have to inform the Paul staff. Their displeasure for each other is real. That's very interesting, Vaso. Yeah, it is. It's palpable, isn't it? You can feel it. They hate each other, and they come prepared for it. And what's fun about it is it is two doctors, right? It's two people who can I know Fauci is like a lifer and Rand sort of a politician now, but you can tell these are two people who have a fundamental disagreement and they do not like each other. That's why they came prepared with their 8.5 by 11 and the billboard. So you see who got the better of those deals. But good to see you, Vaso. Doesn't surprise me at all. Not even a little bit. All right, we're doing a refresh over on Locals so we can see what's here. Rye T is in the house, says first. Wait, where'd that go? We're hitting the next page over here. Rye T was in the house at the start of the program. We've got 3 pages of comments here today, so it's taking me a minute to scroll back through all these pages because there's a lot. Here's Rai T says, first, do I get a prize? Also, hello from Thursday. Yes, Rai T, watch this. Here, I'm going to give you the prize right now. Watch this right here. Click. Boom, there you go. Did it change? There it is, number 4. That's all I got. That's all I can give. Thank you for being here. TOS Forever says, whimsical Wednesday, Rob, and watching the Watchers community. Vientikis says, I'm officially sick of this. I think it's time we brought back an old tradition. Oh, gosh. Prima Nocta. No, wait. That was Braveheart. No, we need to bring back the angry letter campaign and flood the DOJ offices with paper. For them, it's all about power and a show of force. So be it. I'll tell you what my letter will say. I'd like to see you guys in prison next to Trump and Biden. From Vientikis Prime over there. Paul Mino is here talking about jiffing the jiffers, which is sort of is that a take on watching the Watchers? I think it is. Oh, I think it is. Okay, so jiffing the jiffers. Yeah, that sort of gets it all from everybody. We've got a judge in the House saying it's pronounced GIF, judge. And look, it's a GIF mallet. This is amazing. Where are all these GIFs coming from? These legal GIFs. We've got a refresh here. That's the problem I have when I start the GIF conversation. It's gonna, it becomes a GIF show about GIFs. All right, let's see. We've got another page here, and Paul says GIF is peanut butter, GIFs are animations. Another meme. Miss Lucky, Sergeant Bob says, I've been to thousands of crime scenes, and President Trump's home ain't it. That's from Sergeant Bob. Also says the GIF poll shows quite a spread. That's from Sergeant Bob. He says the GIF poll shows quite a spread. Outstanding. And he says pun intended, which is just perfect. So thank you to Sergeant Bob for that one. Beautiful, beautiful. Outstanding. Let's see what else we've got. 3 Girlie says, youngest girlie wanted to get her shout out in early. Big shout out. Happy Wednesday to the youngest girlie over at the 3 Girlies household. Shout out indeed. Paul Mino also had another one. It's a Rick Astley one. Oh, great. Let's see what this one says. Rick Astley gets Rob rolled. Oh, great. Here we go. Here we go. Big, beautiful spotlight. God. Here we go. It's a 3 for 3 on it. Here it is. Big, beautiful spotlight. Oh, my gosh. That's just incredible. With a jiffing the jiffers at the end. Paul, you're out of control over there. What is going on over there? 3 Girlie says, yeah, it's perfect. It's 3 for 3. It's a 3-punch combo. Boom, boom, boom. It's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. Wow, 3 back to back. That's from Paul. Shared that over on Locals. All right, Rai T says, Rob, we missed you on the website, the RG After Stream After Party website, online.net.com.org last night. Hope you can make it tonight. Quick note, there'll be a sales pitch at the end, so get your checkbook out. Yeah, that's later. The after party stream, that's a little bit more expensive than what we're talking about tomorrow. Vientikis says, seriously, what could Lindell possibly have done? Spend money? Didn't Citizens United say that money is speech? Lindell, the only thing he could have done to not be a guilty insurrectionist is not support Trump. That's the only thing. 3 Girlie says, so this idea that Mike Lindell is not supposed to tell anybody, I don't know how that's even legal. Unless a judge is telling him that he can't say something like a gag order, I would think that he does have the freedom of speech. He does. Yeah, he does. But the prosecutor may still have an issue with that. Like, you can have all the free speech in the world you want, but if you piss off the prosecutor, still's a problem. And he said, if you publish this, you're going to kind of make my job harder, right? So it's this veiled threat, like, don't you dare do it. He doesn't have any technical problems, but it is, yeah, the screen's glitching, somebody said. He says, I thought the FBI would had to have a warrant based on the criminal activity. It seems like the same thing happened to Rep. Perry from Pennsylvania. They took his cell phone, returned it back to him. Is the ambush designed? Yes, to catch these people off guard. Yeah. Yeah, they don't want him to delete all their text messages and stuff. Like, they want to just say, drop everything. It's like when you walk somebody out of an office, like an employee. Don't you touch anything. Get out. Kind of one of those deals. Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob says, I have to believe that Trump's well-known supporters have seen the Spanish Inquisition and the secret police. They would be proactive and deal with computers and mobile telephones. As a lot, they're pretty smart people. P.S. We love MyPillows, and we have them wherever we sleep. From Sergeant Bob and Miss Lucky on MyPillows. I don't have any MyPillows. That's not true. I do. They're at a different location. Somebody sent me MyPillows, but they're at a different location. Maybe I should bring them here. Here we have Don't Be Hatin' says, how general is that subpoena? Don't they need to give you specific reasons? Well, they probably did, but we just didn't see it in the documents, right? We just saw the cover sheets. There were those two attachments, attachment A, attachment B. There would also be an affidavit. None of that stuff we got to see quite yet. Zach Nichols is here saying, take the official Watching the Watchers GIF versus GIF poll. Here, let's see. So I'm not going to show you my vote, but let's see what this one says. Oh, there's actually a poll. Let's see here. Uh-oh. All right. Well, I'm not endorsing any of this, but if you want to see what the poll results say, you can go take a look at that over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Paul says, what an awful dream, but it's GIF. From Paul. Aggie Martin says, how could Mike reach out to the AUSA? They took his phone. Yeah, it's true. They can't even call him. Can't even call, right? Okay, another one from Paul. Don't Be Hatin' says, what can you do if they knock on your door with this kind of BS? We're all next. Well, ideally, you have a lawyer you can call. Definitely a good idea. Yeah, we have here, Don't Be Hatin' says, there's three rules that we talk a lot about we talked a lot about this in the law enforcement interaction training that we did a long time ago. I'm going to redo that course and I'll offer that course later again. But three rules, if they have a subpoena and a lawful search warrant and all of those things, there's not much you can do about that. And typically the advice from a lawyer will be just to comply with that, because if you don't comply, they're going to take it anyways, and they're going to charge you with new crimes like obstruction. But if they don't have those things, right, you don't talk to the police, you don't let them into your home, and you demand a lawyer. Those are really the same, the three rules. Rule number one, I don't answer those questions. Number two, no, not without a warrant. And number three, I want a lawyer. Those are the three rules. I'll put together a course on that at some point down the line. Miss Lucky says, just a suggestion, Rob, think about handling the comments at the end of each segment rather than all at the end. Yeah, Three Girlie says, we used to do that. Yeah, the problem with that is, I can show you what the problem is exactly, is this. Let me show you this right now. So when I am monitoring the YouTube chat, this is what I see. And as you'll notice on this graph, so we're going to get this picture-in-picture thing here. You'll notice, right, so this will ultimately, we're going to get the little, the infinity screen here in a minute. And what ultimately happens, though, is when I go into comments, everybody drops off, right? Huge portions of the audience leave. Everybody leaves as soon as I get to comments. We drop by about 1,000 or so people, like as of today. We went from about 5,000 at one point down to about 3. So when I do that, every time I go to comments, it drops. A lot of people actually don't like the comments. So it's just, most people don't like the comments. So if I did that, then we would lose people. Everybody would leave, and then we'd go into the next segment, and then they'd maybe come back. And so that's just why we don't do it. A lot of people bail on the comments. They just say it's not as interesting. They leave. We have here, Paul Minot says, GIF, wrong. We also have another one, GIF, correct. I don't have a Trump correct GIF. I don't have that one. Oh, that's a good one. All right, Thunder7 says, doesn't matter how frightening the ride gets, I'm staying on the Trump train for the entire journey. Yeah, we've got that one here. Miss Lucky says, those photos going to be spoofs. No self-respecting real law enforcement officer would ever pose for those photos. Let's see. For those, the FBI photo. Thunder7 says, Rob, will the Danchenko trial be on camera? And will we be up? No, it's going to be a federal trial. Durham has him on at least 5. He lied to the FBI. It's going to be juicy when he testifies under oath. What names will he name? He won't take a chance of protecting them anymore as his butt's on the line. He's scrambling to avoid prison. I don't know. We'll see. He could just sit there and not say anything and probably be acquitted. Paul Minot says, deciphering acronyms be like, yeah, that's how I feel a lot of the time. Three Girlie says, so these people thought Hillary would get into office and they would have no issues. But apparently they forgot the old adage, be sure your sins will find you out. They did. Yeah, they really thought that this was going to cover their butts big time. And that Hillary would just paper over it. They'd have no power to investigate any of their misdeeds. Didn't happen. Rai T says, now that we've seen unredacted sections that were previously redacted, why do you think those specific sections were redacted in the first place? Is there any justifiable reason to it? Any unjustifiable reason? I think it was just some of the details about the dates and about the. I don't really think that there was a good reason to redact it. Now, I'm somebody who thinks that probably the whole affidavit should be unredacted, although I don't know what's in it. But remember that when we were going through this debate, that there have to be individual justifications for each sentence, essentially, that is redacted. And there was a comparison table that went through this where they said, okay, sentences 1 through 7 is and we couldn't even see what the justification for the redaction was, but there was a justification for it. So when each one of those, it's like different switches. So when switches change, when information becomes public, they go back and they say, okay, we're going to flip these switches now that the May 22nd date has been revealed. We'll now make this knowable, I guess. And I think that's about it. There was an article, Righty, from Jonathan Turley. He has an assessment on this, and maybe I'd refer you over to him. But I think it's just sort of technical mechanical stuff. Not a whole lot more to it. We have another one. Three Girlie says, isn't the signed certification the same thing that Carolyn Maloney from the Oversight Committee, what she wants? Yes, it is. Didn't she say in her letter that it isn't required by law? I think it's not required. You're exactly right, Three Girlies, but it's a different source. The requester is different. So by Congress, right, she doesn't have the authority to demand that. But I don't know if that applies over to like NARA, if Trump made an agreement or something like, I don't know the details of it. But as I sort of explained previously, I would say that if they're Trump's documents under whatever justification, executive privilege, declassification, personal records versus presidential, whatever the explanation is, no, I don't have to give you anything. They're mine. It's like somebody coming to your house and say, can you certify for me that you've got an inventory of your property? You'd say, get the hell out of here. No, it's not yours. You've got no right to know what I have in here. Three Girlies writes, also, if the Trump representatives signed the certification and it wasn't required by law, can they still be legally liable? And good question, right? Again, I don't know. It would sort of depend on prior agreements and the type of law that the claim is being brought under. What basis are they saying they can get those documents back? If that basis provides for some sort of mechanism, then yeah, I would say that maybe they could. Who's to say? But that's not Trump again. That's the custodian of records. And that is not justifying, in my opinion, a raiding of his residence. And who's to say that the certification was signed, that everything was in the storage room, but either they didn't realize that there was more outstanding or later on. See, it says, it seems like there's a lot of flimsy things to hang their hat on. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one, Three Girlies. Let's do a refresh over here on YouTube. Mauricio M became a member, which is amazing. Mauricio, you're going to get those morning walk and talks and some of the other goodies over there at our amazing community. And let's take a look at some of these new comments that just came in. Curtis Bartle says, thanks, Rob and the mods. And before the show started, actually, I forgot to get this one. John McGarvey was in the house. He says, Rob,